Apple is officially out of ideas, and we have the WWDC 2022 to prove it.
We just spent 2 hours watching the Worldwide Developer Conference, and oh boy, it was a thing.
It was pretty boring. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty boring.
There were a lot of rumors that there may not have been any hardware at all, but we are going to get that new MacBook Air coming next month, so I guess we'll see exactly when that is.
So it's a full redesign from the ground up, and by ground up, I mean they pretty much copied and pasted the 14-inch models over there. So it's a 13.6-inch screen, so slightly larger. It's got the thinner bezels. It's got the notch.
Which looks nice. It's no longer has that taper from the MacBook Air.
It looks really nice. Comes in 4 colors now, which is silver,
Midnight, Starlight, which by the way, that's blue and gold in case you don't speak Apple.
The blue looks really nice.
It does look good. There's silver as well as space gray.
Basically, it's looking like this.
Yeah. I mean, there are some neat things here. So you actually have not only 2 USB-C based Thunderbolts, but you also have MagSafe, which is nice, and still the headphone jack, thankfully.
No SD card slot like the MacBook Pros.
Fair enough. And the display also is not 120 hertz. It's not ProMotion. No. What is a pretty major upgrade is the M2 chip inside. So the M2 has some upgrades. So it is still on a 5-nanometer process. It's the 2nd generation. They've given it 2 additional GPU cores, so you can go from 8 to 10. And you also have the ability to go all the way up to 24 gigabytes of RAM. If you go to start outfitting one of these MacBook Airs, they get expensive fast. So they start out at $1199, which is a $200 jump over the previous MacBook Air.
Correct.
But if you want to, say, get 16 gigs of RAM, that's going to be $1399. And if you want 24 gigs of RAM, that's $1599.
So that leads me to my point about M2. You shouldn't buy it. I think you're better spent getting an M1 MacBook Air for cheaper.
Because that's still around at $999.
Yes, it is significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
And even if you spec it out with like 16 gigs of RAM, it's still significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
Now, is the M2 way more powerful? On paper, it is.
I can tell you, it's 18% more powerful.
It's 18% more powerful. It is 25% more powerful because it's got 2 extra GPU cores.
Yeah.
And it's 50% faster memory. But what does that actually mean to you? Not a whole lot. Like, you're measuring in these like fractions of a second at this point because the M1 was just so good. I kind of don't know what the point of M2 is here. I feel like this is a pure stockholder play of just like, we're still pumping these out because there is no need. They could very easily have gotten away with just using the M1 for a couple of years at a time.
My thing with the MacBook Air, and of course, there's a lot more to talk about with WWDC, but specifically with the MacBook Air, this is a solid upgrade, but it is a very pricey upgrade. So,
which defeats the purpose of the MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at with it.
Like if you want to get a MacBook Air with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gig SSD, I don't think a particularly crazy spec. That is $1,700.
No way.
Like at that point, you're only a few $100s away from getting it at 14-inch, which has all the extra ports, more performance, all that kind of stuff, and the much nicer screen. Like, to be fair, you actually do have one thing I think is absolutely worth highlighting, a couple of different power adapters. So you can get a 35-watt dual USB-C or a 67-watt fast charger, and as long as you upgrade your MacBook to not the base model, that comes for free.
Here's where Apple has officially run out of ideas.
They still sell the 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M2 processor?
Yeah. So they took the 13-inch MacBook Pro, didn't do anything to it. It's the only MacBook that still has the touch bar. So if you are the one person in the world, Austin, who did enjoy using the touch bar, you have an option, but there's no update to it. It's still the chunky bezels.
Yeah.
They talked about a lot, but they said very little. This has been the most Apple-fied presentation where like they didn't really have anything to say, so they just kept throwing buzzwords out.
Well, they did show us the Apple Car.
Yeah. So we're calling it here. It is June 6th. 2022, and I'm calling it right now, the Apple Car confirmed, because they have a whole little dashboard. I think this is the biggest update they showed to of anything, is to CarPlay, which now can integrate with future cars to get your speedometer, your gauges. All of that can integrate to any screen you might have on your vehicle. They had some very specific UIs there to cars that don't exist.
Oh yeah, vertical screens, 2 screens, 3 screens, gauges. There's no way that this is not meant for the Apple Car. This is a sneak peek. They said that the vehicles will be starting to be announced end of next year for stuff that will actually happen. Again, this is not something that we're going to see until end of next year at the earliest, and realistically probably even after that. But I think Apple Car confirmed. Apple Car confirmed.
Like you don't put all this work into something that like this is something you're working on. You're like, you know what? We can have our cake and eat it too by putting it in other cars. Which leads me to the next thing about having our cake and eating it too. Remember when y'all said a couple weeks ago,
God, here we go.
You know, I said it looks an awful lot like Apple is getting ready to develop their own gaming console that can do AAA gaming. And everyone in the comments said, scoff! They said, no way, there's no AAA games that will ever come to Apple. And then today we got 2.
What else could you need but 2 games? No Man's Sky and Resident Evil Village.
The fact that I can bring Big Mommy Vampire with me anywhere I go.
All right, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah.
We don't know.
There's an update to the Metal architecture, so it's now Metal 3.
So there's a couple of major improvements. So there's a new storage API, very similar to what Microsoft and Xbox do with the direct storage. And there is also the Metal FX upscaling, which very much seems like DLSS on NVIDIA graphics cards or Fidelity FX on AMD, essentially allowing a game to run at a lower resolution, then upscaling it so that you get more performance / more frame rate.
Metal 3 is coming to iPad with specifically the M1 iPads. Will we be able to play Resident Evil on there?
No. I
don't think so.
Those are for Mac only, but the underlying architecture with the new updates are on iPad as well. So there's a fair bit of stuff to go through. You want to hit on some iOS stuff because there's a bunch of like small things, like the lock screen has been completely redesigned, which looks nice.
The lock screen on iOS is definitely the biggest update there. So
it's the only thing that looks different.
If you're familiar with any of the watch faces for this, it's basically that whole system is now your home screen.
You can now edit, unsend, and you can mark threads as unread on iMessage. Also, you can now take photos in your camera roll and have them instantly share with your family. So as you're taking your photos of whatever it is that you want to take photos of, there's a button where it'll accidentally send it to mom. So be warned, iPhone 16's coming for you.
Speaking of photos with your phone, let's talk about where Apple's really scraping the barrel here.
You do it.
So one thing that has never been good on the MacBook Pros is the cameras. They've been trash for so long.
It's okay now, but it's not good.
Yeah, here's the thing though. The cameras on these things have never been good. They're okay now. But instead of giving us decent cameras, Apple's actual full seriousness solution is to grab your iPhone and mount it to the top of your damn
continuity camera. Wirelessly turns your iPhone into a webcam.
The most egregious one, though, is desk view. So they're claiming if you have your camera like this, with the wide-angle camera, you can get a full top-down style angle.
To aim down toward your lower area and get a nice, clean shot of your desk.
Now, I tried this out with the proper angle. It didn't quite work out. We'll show that picture right here. So, look, this is a bad feature.
It's weird.
Do I think it's a bad idea to be able to seamlessly use your iPhone as a webcam? No. We've gone on multiple Broke versus Pros where we talk about, like, oh, yeah, if you can't afford, like, a decent webcam, use your phone, whatever. That's fine. That's good. But to say, like, oh, this is what you want to use for FaceTime. FaceTime is in your phone. You have it right here.
I agree. The iPhone always will have a better camera than what you can fit in a MacBook. That makes sense. Just the way that they showed it off is kind of silly. Taking your phone and mounting it onto the top of your computer, like 2 inches away from your slightly worse webcam, makes no sense to me. You know what I got really excited for? You were there. You watched me get excited for it.
I did watch him get excited for it.
iPadOS.
We finally get it.
We finally get it. The iPad's good again.
Finally get it.
Stage Manager. External full display support.
But we're finally getting No. We're finally getting external monitor support with like proper one with a big old asterisk.
No, there's no asterisk
There
at
is.
all.
So you only can have 4 of these Stage Manager icons or whatever they're calling it, whatever. You lose about 10% of your screen real estate when Stage Manager's up.
It's fine because you can now resize iPad apps. So before you were stuck doing like the slide overs and blah, blah, blah. And to be fair, until we actually spend some time with it, I'm still a little unclear. Does all apps support this?
Here's the other asterisk. It sounded an awful lot like this only works with M1 iPads. Where it makes the most sense is to use it with the Mini, and the Mini can't do it.
No, that's not true. I'm frantically Googling it. Stage Manager, available on iPad Air 5th generation, iPad Pro 12.9 5th generation, and iPad Pro 11 3rd generation.
I'm sorry, was I correct? Was I correct? Well, someone was just hearing what they wanted to hear because they were so excited. Someone else was paying attention, so I can give you, the viewers, the proper news. If you do it on the Mini, you got like 12 pixels of real estate left to look at your apps.
I legitimately plug my iPad Mini into a 4K USB-C display. I use it with a mouse and keyboard at home. It's a little dumb, but I kind of like it. And you know what? It doesn't even work with a older iPad Pro. You need a brand new iPad Pro. I was so excited. Now my hopes and dreams have been dashed.
And that's what we kind of say. Like, this whole thing was just kind of meh. They had updates to Watch, which was pretty much just like some workout and sleep
mostly
stuff. They had some updates to Maps, quality of life improvement.
A lot of little things. Very little big things.
Yeah. So this just seemed like the TikTok year, not the app, but like the cycle. Am I happy that they're pushing the boundaries with M2? Yes. I don't see why we needed it right now. I feel like we could have let it breathe another year or so. I think just financially doesn't make sense to recommend that to almost anyone at the moment.
It seems like a small improvement in performance for what seems like a fairly big price jump. Obviously, that new MacBook Air has other things besides just the pure specs, but when you look at how expensive that is compared to the 13 and the 14-inch MacBook Air Pros, obviously things are getting more expensive, I get it, but when you have so many M1 Macs that, yeah, they might be a year or two old at this point, and they're available for hundreds of dollars less, it becomes difficult to recommend a MacBook Air by default. And honestly, you should not buy a MacBook Air with 8 gigs of RAM. Like, just ignore all of those. So add $200 to the price of pretty much every single MacBook Air, which...
last year, we had a hard time recommending anything but the MacBook Air.
Yeah.
Because of how good the M1 was and how affordable it was.
The minimum base spec of a MacBook Air I could recommend is $1,400, and that's still 256 gig of SSD.
That ain't it. What do you think? Was this a pretty lackluster WWDC? Did you think it was the best thing since sliced bread?
By the way, Matt, I just realized if you want to get the MacBook Air, you want to get with the full 10-core GPU, that's an additional $100. So it's $1,500.
Way too much for a MacBook Air.